Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni moni wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is a special Protecting the Planet with Your Kids episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts, part of this beautiful world that we all call home. Thank you so very much for joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading and protecting the planet. Our guest today is Tarisa Parrish. She is the author of The Adventures of Johnny Butterfly Seed. Hey, Tarisa, welcome to the Reading with Your Kids podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great, Jed. Happy to be here today.
I'm happy to have you on here. The Adventures of Johnny Butterfly Seed. And I was doing research and preparing for this episode of the show. I was on your website, and one of the things that just kind of, bam, hit me like a brick was a quote that you have that says, "We cannot live in a world where the monarch butterfly does not exist, period." That's, I think, is a great place to start. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, for me, growing up with lots of monarchs and then seeing over the years the decline of them, it literally breaks my heart. And just by saying this, what I mean is it's kind of a wake-up call. People need to understand, which most people don't, that there has been such a rapid decline of the monarch butterfly. So much that they have been put on the endangered species list as of December 14th of last year. Now, they haven't given a priority yet, but I don't think anyone would want the monarch butterfly to disappear from our existence.
Yeah. Well, I agree. And I know that your passion for monarch butterflies, maybe it's fueled by the fact that they are beautiful and majestic in their own way, but they serve a really important purpose here on the earth. Am I right?
Well, they do. As part of the pollinators on Earth, they help our crops grow. So if you think of, pollinators in general, which include the monarch butterfly, a lot of people don't make the connection that their little feet, when they go land on different flowers or vegetables or anything like this, they're transferring and cross-pollinating the things that are needed in order for those fruits and vegetables to grow. So with the rapid decline of pollinators in general, for the same reasons that the monarch is disappearing, is the usage of, pesticides and herbicides on our plants and our crops, as well as a lot of the development that's happening and taking away the land that is normally somewhere where the pollinators are able to place their eggs and grow and thrive.
Wow. So they're in danger, and there are other pollinators that are in danger. Are we talking bees, and what other creatures are in danger?
Well, I'm thinking bees in general, because that's one of the big ones that we talk about. And, the bees, a lot of people are afraid of getting stung by a bee, but the bees are, just like the monarchs, very necessary part of our food chain.
Yeah. Now, I was really shocked to find out that there are bees and beekeepers, who actually take their bees and beehives from farm to farm because there are not enough wild, I don't know if that's the right term, but the bees are in such demand that they're actually trucked from place to place, and they're so valuable that oftentimes the hives are stolen. That's true. I can't imagine that.
Yeah, I know it is hard to imagine that someone would steal a hive of bees.
Yeah. But it's, there is that demand. And as you're saying that, these creatures are in danger because of our actions, because of the pesticides that we use, because of the encroachment on their land. Are there other things that we're doing that are affecting the monarch and the other pollinators?
I think part of it is it's an unconscious state. So without the knowledge of what our actions are, we can't understand the impact that we're making. So I would say, and this is exactly why I wrote The Adventures of Johnny Butterfly Seed, is that there's an entire generation of children who aren't going to be taught those things that are necessary to make really great decisions about the climate and our environment and endangered species in the future. So coming to them now and engaging and inspiring them as children to understand the impacts that we are making as humans, as well as what we might do to be able to create a change that ensures a future of decision makers who care about the environment and the species and our climate.
Yeah. And I think it's important for our kids to understand that it's when we're talking about making choices for the planet, we're not just talking about choosing not to use pesticide or choosing not to litter. A lot of the decisions in our lives and a lot of the ways that we've come to live here in the United States and in other developed countries is really harming the environment. Can you talk about some of those things and some of the ways, some of the things that we can get our kids to start thinking about?
I think just in general, what we've been talking about really is understanding cause and effect.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we go, even as adults, most of us go about doing things every single day that we don't even actually think about the end impact of what we're doing. So for kids, I think the most important thing in the world is to be able to teach them, you know, just by doing this small thing, let's talk it all the way through what might happen. Maybe it doesn't happen today. Maybe it happens in the future, but to understand the whole cause and effect. So, like, for example, an adult that goes out and they find bees and they're like, oh my gosh, I don't want anyone to get stung. So they go around and they try to kill all the bees. They have no thought process beyond, I don't want anyone to be stung. Their thought process needs to take that next leap, and they need to be able to educate their kids like, actually, bees are good. If you don't actually engage and enrage them, they're not going to sting you. Just let them go about their business, because if we kill the bees, we might not be able to have vegetables in our garden this year, right? I mean, it's like just threading it through, teaching them about cause and effect, and so that we can create conscious human beings that think, if I do X, that might happen, and that might happen. So maybe I'll do something different that creates a better effect in the future.
Yeah. I really love that, because I think it's so important. We've talked a lot here on the show in different contexts about helping our kids be more mindful. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about them to truly make choices and not just act, and to think about what the consequences of their choices. And that's really important for our kids, you know, in terms of the choices they're making when they're dealing with other people. Mm-hmm. And it makes a big difference in the choices they make with nature. And I think that's, again, I think something that we've forgotten, especially when you're living in a city. You don't understand that we are living and interacting with nature, and we need to share nature.
That's so true. And especially for those living in a city, sometimes you forget there's forests out there, but you'll still see a lot of that same life happening in an urban environment. It's just in a different way. So, you know, having an urban butterfly garden is really an awesome thing to do, because if you plant those milkweeds and those nectar sources and the shelter for these butterflies, they will absolutely thrive in the middle of an urban environment.
All right. You brought up a subject. I need to talk to you about this. My beautiful wife and my beautiful wife has this amazing garden. We're fortunate. We live in the city of Boston, but we're literally at the city line, and on the other side of our property is a wildlife sanctuary. So we have lots of trees, and there's lots of green in our yard. I can't call it a lawn because a lawn's supposed to be the same thing, but we just have this big green space. And my wife has a beautiful garden in front of the house, and there are these just things that are just huge that just grow naturally in her garden. And she says they're weeds. And I said, no, they're beautiful plants. It turns out they're milkweeds. I need to talk to my beautiful wife about how important are the milkweeds?
They're absolutely critically important. So because people think of these as weeds, they've been pulled, they've been sprayed, they've been eliminated. And without milkweed, there will be no monarchs. This is what they must lay their eggs on. This is exactly what their caterpillars must eat in order to get to the point of forming a chrysalis. So, and when I tell people, they're like, what can I do? I'm like, oh my gosh, the simple act of planting milkweed and allowing the caterpillars to chew it up, even though they'll clean it right off, I'll be honest. They'll just strip it completely out as they're going into their chrysalis. But being okay with that. And I think just here, I know in America, we've been taught, have your nice green lawn and have your beautifully manicured garden and pull everything that isn't something you planted. But what we really need to do is say, you know what really needs to grow here? Like every area has native plants that grow. There's hundreds of different types of milkweed that grow in every different region of the United States. And we need to just allow it. Yeah. And not get rid of it, because there's such beautiful transformation that happens, and we actually support the lives of an endangered species, wow. The monarch.
And I just had a hard time calling it a weed because it's pretty. I mean, it
grows.
It can grow like 3 or 4 feet high, and there's flowers and big leaves, and I'm like, it's just like the other thing.
Yeah, that's a mistake to call it a weed, but we call it butterfly weed, right? And it's like, why? It's beautiful flowers.
Yeah. So what other kind of things can we do with our kids? Because certainly now I understand my wife works very hard in her yard, and there are certain things that she wants there. So what I can do, I know, is I could take these milkweeds and move them to another part of the yard that she's not all that worried about, that we have lots of space, and maybe we'll have a milkweed forest down there in the next year or two. What other kind of things can families do, whether they're in the city or out in the country? What can we do to encourage and help the monarchs thrive?
Well, I always recommend when people are first getting started and they want to teach their kids about this is to either go buy, believe it or not, they do sell butterfly weed at different stores. So buy or grow your milkweed and then put it in a tent. And after it has eggs on it, I have to say you have to learn how to first identify eggs. But if you put milkweed outside, the monarchs have like a little radar. And what I call it is they'll start swooping down and they shop. And they look around and they'll go flit from plant to plant to plant and find the plant that they like the most, and they'll start to lay eggs. If you're watching, you'll see like a female butterfly land on it, and she'll do this little movement, and she's actually planting multiple eggs on the underside of the leaf, and they're little tiny white, maybe little cream-colored dots. And once you have those eggs on the plant, you can put your milkweed in a tent, a butterfly tent. It's like a screened-in tent, and, water the plant and watch, and within, I would say, probably 3 to 5 days, a little itsy bitsy tiny, you can hardly even tell what it is, little tiny caterpillar comes out of that egg. And then they start to eat, and it takes about 14 days. And they become large enough to go into their chrysalis. And inside the tent, they'll find a place to just plant themselves and turn that chrysalis. And then you can watch, because in another 10 to 14 days, a butterfly comes out.
Wow.
And, for anyone who's observing this, you do not need to be a scientist. You just have to love nature. If you observe this transformation and you've felt like, I've been watering the plant, I've been making sure that my caterpillar has enough milkweed to eat, and then see this butterfly come out, you get the life cycle. You get the miracle of what's happening. It goes from looks like a little tiny worm into this beautiful butterfly, which, by the way, can travel over 2,000 miles on its own for overwintering.
Yeah. Am I right in thinking that I read somewhere that the the monarchs that we might see here in Massachusetts and Minnesota will fly down to Mexico for the winter?
Yeah, most of the ones will fly towards Mexico. They track this. So when you have organizations like monarchwatch.org, their whole goal and purpose is to track the monarchs that are going to Mexico. Now, in Florida, for example, we don't have our monarchs leave here and go anywhere. They stay here because of the warmth that we have. No one is really officially tracking if those monarchs, let's say in Boston, decide that they're going to just go down to the east coast of Florida. Maybe they don't go to Mexico. I'd really love to see some research around the tagging. So that's one thing that you can do, by the way, to see where your monarch goes is Monarch Watch gives out these little tiny tags. And so when you hatch your butterfly, you can put one of those Monarch Watch tags on it. And then if someone observes a monarch in a different location and it has the tag on, they can turn that in, and you can literally track with everyone who's involved in observing these. You can track where the monarchs go.
I am sitting here and I am thinking, now my kids are 25 and 28 right now, and they're, they live in their own, but what a fun year-round activity for a family to start with and parents, I know some of you might be sitting there thinking, but I don't know enough about biology. This is something that the kids will learn in school. Learning it from you through this kind of a project that you could, be involved in all summer long. And, starting with the planting of the milkweed and attracting the butterflies and watching the eggs be laid and watching the caterpillars hatch, creating a chrysalis, the butterflies come out, knowing that your butterfly that you and your kids helped create, give a home to, is going to be responsible for helping to feed people all throughout this continent by flying down. And what a super empowering gift to give to our 5 and 7 and 10-year-old kids.
It truly is a gift. And if I have to use gaming terms, gaming dynamics that kids understand, it's like when you do this, it's like your mind expands. So you level up. You level up in the game of life and as a contributor to be helping our environment.
Yeah. And I think, we the goal of this series is to inspire families to protect the planet together, to come together, to take action, to protect the planet. This is a really, really fun action because it's bonding. You're going to be bonding with your kids. Your kids, by knowing that they're contributing positively to the world, I think it's going to make them much more conscious about their decisions, and they're not going to want to they're going to consciously make an effort to not hurt the planet. And that's a great place to start.
And it also gives them that jumping point to think of like how many other things that they can do to help. Because once you have a very positive experience in contributing in some way, you all of a sudden your mind is expanded and you sit back and you think, what else can I do? How can I continue to make a difference? Yeah.
And boy, oh boy, there was nothing that I loved more when my son and my daughter were both 5, 6 years old, younger even, than sitting in the garden and watching the butterflies and the hummingbirds and even the bees come out and fly around, and just to know that we were sharing our home with all of these beautiful creatures.
Yeah, I absolutely love watching. And of course, I taught all of my kids the same thing. Just go outside and get down on the grass and start looking at what's crawling around in the lawn. All these amazing looking bugs of all different colors, and, watching ants, pick things up and carry them somewhere and thinking, wow, they're carrying things that are bigger than they are. It's fascinating. Nature itself is so fascinating. And having your kids understand that we are connected all together in this nature, And supporting that is so important.
Yeah. You know, I was just thinking, my beautiful wife and I have done, before the pandemic, we were doing a lot of exploring, and we explored a lot of the rainforest down in Central America. And it's beautiful. Now, when we're talking about being in the rainforest, and you're seeing hundreds of species of butterflies, and some of them are huge. They're bigger than my dog. But you don't need to go to Central America to experience and appreciate nature. We may not have 100 species of butterflies here in Boston, but we do have different species of creatures and butterflies. And maybe, families, they take vacations all the time, and so many families go to Disneyland and Universal and all these artificial places, and they're great. But maybe one summer you take a trip with the intention of being in nature so that you can experience the wonders of nature and help your kids develop a better appreciation of nature.
Yeah, I think the important part is, first of all, the parents have to want to do that. Mm-hmm. And until you have an experience like you and your wife did, where you went somewhere and you embraced this and like, wow, it's hard to pass that feeling on or want to pass that feeling on unless you feel it. Mm-hmm. So I would say for all the parents out there, no matter how you feel about nature, go out and have some experiences that, as soon as you have an experience, it's almost like it gives you a different sort of wisdom. You can read about something, but when you experience it and you actually have that, it provides you that wisdom to be able to speak to it from the heart. Yeah. And that's so important. I mean, anyone can tell if you're BSing something, right? Mm-hmm. So have that experience and speak from passion.
Yeah. Now, I know one thing that can maybe ignite that passion and that interest is your book, The Adventures of Johnny Butterfly Seed. Briefly tell us a little bit about that book and what kind of things we're going to experience as a family reading that.
So Johnny has a friend named Raven Silverwing, who is a fairy that helps him with things. And so Johnny, he's grown up loving the butterflies. Raven introduced the butterflies when he was very, very small. And Johnny has been very sad because he sees year over year the population of the monarch butterfly disappearing. And he wants to do something. And what I love about the book is that Johnny faces some challenges himself in figuring out how he, by himself, could make a difference. And I think a lot of kids also have this sort of experience where they're like, well, what I do won't matter because I'm just one person. And so through this book, Johnny will face challenges, and with Raven and others, he learns that what he just has to do is start. And if he just does one small thing every single day, it turns into a very big difference. And he also learns that he might think he's alone, but there are so many other people out there that have the same passion. And as you go out there and you start doing things, you start to connect with people, and you're not doing it alone. A lot of people want to help, and then it makes the difference so much bigger. And so Johnny is able to overcome these challenges, and he goes around and he educates all sorts of children on what's happening with the monarch butterfly. And it's a multiplier in the difference that he can make in the world when it comes to saving the monarch butterfly.
Wow. And I know you have a really fascinating website. Can you tell us where we can find the website and what kind of things we'll find there?
So the website is www.johnnybutterflyseed.com. What you're going to find on the website, there's a blog that provides a lot of educational on not just the monarch butterfly, but endangered species in general, in different activities that the team of Johnny Butterfly Seed does to help save endangered species. So that's educational. You can also buy the book. You can buy different things that go with the book, gifts, mugs, etc. And keeping that sort of education piece going in the future. We're going to introduce ways that, schools can adopt different activities for kids, for homeschool parents to be able to teach their kids about the butterflies. and it will continue to grow. Johnny Butterfly Seed The Adventures is the first book in a series that is going to be all about endangered species. Wow. So hopefully people can find this sort of like place where they can go in a way that they can educate their kids, whether they're doing homeschooling or just as a parent or in a school, and continue to build the sort of information that the kids need in order to make really great decisions, not only now, but in the future.
Yeah. And I'm just curious, what's the next endangered species that you're going to be writing about?
I haven't figured that out completely yet. Here being in Florida, I'm just going to tell you there's this thing called the gopher tortoise, which is so prehistoric. There's a central ridge in Florida called the Lake Wales Ridge where things exist because they were never underwater. And so my heart kind of goes, because I'm a Floridian, to some of these things. So the gopher tortoise is always the first thing that pops into my mind, but there's so many other things too that I need to consider, but they are just a fascinating creature, and it would make a really good children's story.
Well, we can't wait, and we want you to know that there is an open invitation when whatever species you write about, we would love to have you back on. We've had a great time. Parents, create your own butterfly garden. Let's do that. Send in your pictures of your butterfly garden. We'll share them here, and just definitely go visit Tarisa's website. Check out The Adventures of Johnny Butterfly Seed, which was written by our guest, Tarisa Parrish. Hey, Tarisa, thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Jed. It's been a pleasure.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be D.W. Vogel. She'll be here to celebrate her middle grade novel, Super Dungeon, The Forgotten King. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to thank our guest, Tarisa Parrish. Be sure to check out The Adventures of Johnny Butterfly Seed. Plant some milkweed together with your kid. Let's find a home for all the butterflies that we want floating around, flying around in our lives. Also want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan, Justina Thompson, Helen Frazier. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. We'll be looking for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.